I wanted to ask something about surrender. So this feels like today's theme a bit, and particularly about um, surrender and taking action. I tend to, I don't know, find there is a problem for me to mm, being with what is and to take action and not to become really passive.
The thing with surrender is we're not surrendering action, we're surrendering the surrenderer, the person, the I. You could look at it in quite different terms, and this might give you a sideways step to all of this. And that is, and I'll rectify the issue that will come up because of this in a minute, but that is to give it all to God. To give it all to God. Now the issue is, well, God, what is that? Where does that fit in? We'll come to that in a minute. But just for now, give it all to God. What is that speaking of? What that's speaking of is the emptying out of my will and the recognition of this action is happening. Take my hands off of it. This action is happening. I give it all to God. As in, I give up the I, and what is left is the happening. So it's not passive at all. It's the trusting that whatever impulse, whatever is coming, whatever action, whatever impulse is arising, sense to give up the cup, pick up the cup. It's not me picking up the cup, that's what's happening. And actually, in that, we see even the me is what's happening. The me that is struggling and wanting to know whether I should surrender or do, or what do I do, and how do I surrender, and do I give this up, or do I do that? Do I need to do action, or I'm just going to sit on the bed? Because actually, even sitting, doing that, quotes, doing nothing is still a doing. So actually, it's just a laying it all before life. Letting life move through you exactly as it wants, as it must. Now we'll come to the God bit. It's like a placeholder. That placeholder is not me, not the personal me. The placeholder is, okay, there's a recognition of there is something greater here. And actually, that greater, we spoke about it at the beginning of the session. That's the spiritual heart. That's God, if you want to talk in those terms. So God is not other. God is not a man in the sky. God is our nature. But it gives the mind something to give it to, so to speak. That's what I mean about the placeholder. Sort of gives us this sense of, I give my sense of me doing to life. So it's actually it's not the focus on God per se, it's the recognition of what's happening, which is that surrender of the me, surrender of I need to do this. And actually, when that surrender really truly comes about in the manner in which we're speaking about it here, it's not even a doing. It's a tuning into a noticing that surrender is. I'm not doing surrender. There is surrender. It all changes, the perspective changes, it shifts into the recognition of surrender is the flow of life, actually. Life is just at flow, is just at movement. Beingness is at movement. And you're surrendering to that recognition. So practically speaking, we'll get back to practically speaking. Practically speaking, if there can be a surrender of the one that feels it is doing into the recognition of even that one is just a happening. So even the sense of I need to control this moment and do this thing, even that is just a happening. There's the surrender. It's not actually surrender, it's just a shift of recognition that happens, and noticing that happens. That yes, even this is just arising. Even this person who, wants to go and do this thing, even this. And in that recognition, you see, okay, well, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And if what's happening is lying on the bed and sick and thought, I am surrendering, I am surrendering, I am surrendering, well, that's what's happening too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, happens.
It does. Funny that.
What I just noticed when you said give it all to God, this sensation or this feeling of okay, I can finally breathe. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is where, so there's two responses to that can happen. Where we are ripe to sink into the spiritual heart, which is that recognition of surrender, that recognition of God as the heart. There's where we feel that sense of liberation, that sense of freedom, that sense of However, if that's not quite ripe in us yet, and again, we don't choose that, it's just a description. If that's not quite ripe in us, there's where the head kicks in and goes, yeah, but hang on, if I give it all to God, suddenly it's like the opposite of freedom. It's like contraction. It's like, oh God, this is not good. Fear. And so I'm pointing this out not to make ourselves right or wrong in this, but to recognize that there's maybe a ripening that needs to happen further, whereby there is a readiness to let go, a readiness of that surrender, a readiness of a sinking into the heart of oneself. And also the recognition, that's why I bring it up, to see, that's what's going on here. I'm sinking into the spiritual heart. That's the core of being, the innermost, truest sense of self. That's why it feels so expansive and relieving and freeing, because there's that recognition there. There's that sense of the taste of the truth of it all. So you can use God as a placeholder, if that helps. But eventually, even that dissolves and disappears, and it's recognized it is all the self, everything, every last drop of experiencing, from the most seemingly abstract, from the most divine, all the way down to the most mundane and ordinary and solid and material sense of something. It is all the self.